So this session is connecting policy and programming, and it's a facilitated networking discussion. And so the point of this session is to really get everyone to really know each other a little bit better and to talk about some of the issues in programming and policy. And hopefully the conversation can continue after the session and indeed even the conference is over. So my name is Tasleem Thawer. You might know me from being the MC on the stage. I'm a policy consultant in another life. And my colleague here is Micheline McKay. And Micheline's going to talk a little bit in the beginning about the connection between policy and programming. And then the session will go like this. We're going to ask you to create full tables so that you can have real dialogue and conversation. Get to know each other for about 5 minutes, and then we will break stuff up a little bit, and we'll tell you how that will go after Micheline's introduction.
Thank you very much, Tasleem. We are very aware that we are the act following a very good lunch, so hopefully we are going to have you moving around, and there will be some blood moving in your veins as we do talk about this connection of the connection of programming and policy. Just to get the ball rolling, I think we could say right from the start that there are a number of perspectives through which one may look at this question of programming and policy. Yesterday, we certainly heard from the minister and then subsequently from the staff at the OLA's office about where the federal government sees literacy policy going right now. And I mean, there's clearly a connection to the economy and to the jobs. I would put it out to you to consider that question to say, is this where literacy policy fits in your view? How do we work together as a literacy sector to align where you believe that literacy policy should be and with the policies of government? These are just some of the questions that we want you to think about today as we move forward. There was a great session this morning that I attended, Bridget Hayes, I see Bridget sitting at the back of the room, where she talked about social capital and the human aspect of policy. I mean, those are very interesting prisms to look at. One of the things we need you now to do is to take the information that you received from yesterday, the information from today, and say, okay, how do we connect the programming that your agencies are currently offering to policy of government, not only the federal government, I would submit, but also provincial governments across this country. So to move forward to the next stage, what we'd like to do is, first of all, to ensure that we do have full tables. So if you're at a table with just 3 people or 4 people, if we could just get together and make full tables, we'll start from that. And then Tasleem's going to give you the next set of instructions from there. Okay?
We like musical chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't need much help. This is good. We're together to align.
Yeah, we need more people at this table.
We need, if we need a couple more people perhaps at this table at the front. Sorry, if you come in late, you get a time or two. No, but that'd be great. If you would, yeah. Do we need one more? Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So over the next 5 minutes, what we'd like you to do is go around your tables, introduce yourself, the organization that you're from, and a tiny bit, maybe 10 seconds, about what you do there. And then an initial thought about the question, how can we work together as a literacy sector to align policy and programming? And you have about 5 or 7 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back and tell you what to do next. Okay, so the next step of this facilitated networking discussion is if each table could nominate one person to come and sit at this table right here, which is mic'd, we're going to have a facilitated discussion here where we're going to bring together some of the thoughts that you had in each of your discussions, and then we'll break back out into these groups, just to kind of mix things up a little bit. So if every table wants to send one person or a volunteer from each table to sit at this table right here, that would be great. And it'll be about 15 minutes. Okay, so we have 5 people around the table and me. And what I want to do again is go around the table really quickly, your name, the province that you're from, and what were some of the initial thoughts on the question. And we will start with you on my right.
Okay. I'm Lee Garrett from CNIB in Ontario. One of the issues that we discussed is the fact that government policy can sometimes be rather narrow in its range of looking at needs of learners. And it doesn't always fit the needs that are actually being seen in the field. I mean, it's kind of hitting the midpoint, but not necessarily those on either side of it. And also the fact that our agencies all have policies in place, and trying to make the agency policy fit with the government policy, because in the end, the government is paying for these programs. So we have to be able to satisfy their requirements, or we're basically not going to have a program to run.
At our table, we discussed my name is Kay Monroe, and I'm from London, Ontario. And at our table, we discussed about having one voice and one message to send, and then giving examples and variations of how we can deliver the message and influence policy. I think that was our alignment.
My name is Anna Bertry. I am from Brampton, Ontario, and I run a Francophone Literacy Center. And what we discussed, or what I announced more, is that since 2000 we have guidelines from the ministry. And so those guidelines are pretty straightforward and very confining. Those guidelines come from some core quality standards that were put together many years ago. And the only flexibility we have is how we administer the program. However, everything has to be done in order to satisfy the guidelines. Also, in Ontario, we produced, as the centers, we produced many numbers. We produced how many contact hours, how many learners have left, how many referral and information we've had. So the numbers are there for the ministry, and I think in order to align policy and programming, the ministry has to be more educated that our learners are people, not just those numbers.
Great, thank you.
My name's Bridget Hayes, and I'm from Ottawa, Ontario. And my group is made up of people who are at a different level in that they all but one are involved with running literacy coalitions at the provincial level, and then 2 of us were consultants. So we actually had a conversation that was a little different in that we were talking about not how we can influence government policy, but how government policy influences the practice within the coalitions, and how, for the example we were using was how OLIS has been saying that people need to do literacy and essential skills. And in several provinces, essential skills and workplace literacy are done separately from adult education and adult literacy, and what that has meant for the organizations as they have tried to reposition themselves. And then I think that was probably the best public part of the conversation to share. So it was the question of not only how you're being influenced, not just at the practitioner level, but at that provincial level, and the repercussions of that without having a way to talk about it with the government very openly.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Kavanagh, and I'm from Newfoundland, Labrador, working with a community agency there, not necessarily directly involved in literacy. We had a bit of a large group, so by the time we all introduced each other, we never got into a big, lengthy discussion on some issues, although there was a comment about the whole idea of the literacy community coming together in this country as one voice to make sure we express the views and needs and be able to advocate on behalf of clients. I will offer two comments I made, which I think might have struck a chord with at least some of the group around the table. Two concerns I personally have as someone who was more or less on the peripheral of literacy in my community, and that is, after listening to the minister yesterday and some other people who tend to come from the government sector, I'm a little disappointed in this conference with the sole and singular emphasis on literacy as a means of getting a job, of being linked strictly to the only purpose of learning and being literate is to get a job, is to contribute to the economy. And to paraphrase someone much wiser than me, the purpose of an education / literacy is not just to learn how to earn a living, but how to live a life. So, and I tend to think that people who come from community see a much broader need of being literate rather than just simply contributing to the labor market. So I'm kind of concerned that that seems to be lost somehow in this conference. And the other issue I have is I heard the minister say about whatever you want to do, this government will support you. I find it difficult across this country, and it's not just nationally, but in some provinces, and I come from one, Newfoundland, Labrador, where there's a kind of a one-man show, and if you don't pull your weight and concur with what the status quo is, you're kind of slapped on the wrist and told to keep quiet, and your funding is cut off. And I find it difficult that people who work in the literacy field have to have the right to advocate on behalf of clients. And in this country, I don't see us as having that freedom, because if you don't go along with the status quo and stand in line and not criticize, then you could lose funding. So that's a concern that I personally would have.
Great. This is a wealth of information for the beginning of a discussion. And I think that Ken's comments really fit in with what the topic of this particular session is, which is how do we align our programming and our values with the policy that's been kind of handed down from above. And so kind of with that in mind, it's kind of open season, folks. Like if we have, do we have anybody from government in the room here? Please, would you like to come to the table? It would be great to have you as part of this discussion.
Good.
And if you can introduce yourself and your opening thoughts, that would be a dream to me, in fact. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Virginie Zillet. I'm working with OLES. I'm part with the policy and plannings. So the thought for opening the discussion.
To open the discussion of how, as very different stakeholders here, we have coalitions, we have service organizations, government, how might we start working together to align programming and values of programming organizations with government and the aims and goals of the government currently?
I don't know what to say. I just mentioned maybe that at the part of the government, we try to work with many stakeholders to develop the policy and see what will happen. So we develop some, with OLES, we have projects that we fund directly with the program, but we also have some work with the coalition. So maybe the way to focus is maybe the kind of discussion that we have right now, or the kind of meeting with OLC have organized, that we have the possibility to discuss what each field is doing. So maybe if we have more communication with the different fields, we will be able to develop more policy that can really reflect what the population, the Canadian, need.
Okay, so keeping in mind that, I mean, we're all, really at the end of the day, I think we all want the same things. We want great programs, we want more literacy programming, we want people to be better off than they were before. And that's what helps everybody, regardless of whether you're a programming organization or coalition or part of the government. So with that in mind, I mean, does anybody around this table have any thoughts about what kind of first steps might we take if tomorrow, or if 10 years from now, everyone was